Go ahead and officially open the Prince George's County Preservation Month Annual Reception 2022. Here we are. We are once again virtual, and we look forward to the day, someday, when we will be able to gather again in person and feed you and give you drinks. But in the meantime, hopefully you have had something to eat and may have a glass to raise if the mood strikes you during tonight's presentation. But I hope that we can approximate the experience of an in-person event at least somewhat, with some engaging presentations by local preservation organizations and with some lively chatter in the chat, which Meagan Baco will be moderating. So before we move on, I just want to say a quick word of thanks to the folks who have joined us as speakers this evening. We have represented the Prince George's County Historic Preservation Commission staff working for the Prince George's County Planning Department. Hang on just a minute. Mute that. I'm going, let's see. Yes, the Historic Preservation Commission staff. We have Maryland Milestones, the Anacostia Trails Heritage Area. We have the Prince George's County Historical Society. We have the Department of Parks and Recreation, and we have the University of Maryland School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. So the way this evening is going to work is we have a series of speakers, and I will just preview them for you here. We're going to start with some remarks that have been recorded and sent to us by Elizabeth Hughes, who is the State Historic Preservation Officer, the Director of the Maryland Historical Trust. Travel plans precluded her in-person attendance, but she did send us some remarks, and we're very grateful for that. So we will start off with that. We will then move to a presentation by our co-organizer for the evening, Meagan Baco, with the Anacostia Trails Heritage Area, Maryland Milestones. Then we will move to Donna Schneider, President of the Prince George's County Historical Society and Library, for an update on the Society's activities. Then we will hear from Stefan Woehlke of the University of Maryland, and I believe he will be introduced by Dr. Michelle Magalong, also of the University of Maryland. So we look forward to hearing from Dr. Magalong and Dr. Woehlke from UMD. Then getting a little bit closer to home for us, the Commission's Department of Parks and Recreation will be represented by Ed Day, the lead Historic Preservation Officer. And then coming back to the Historic Preservation Commission staff to finish up, I will speak for a few minutes. My colleague, Dr. Jennifer Stabler, will address archaeology issues. And then we will wrap up with the supervisor of the Historic Preservation section, Howard Berger, acknowledging this year's recipients of historic site plaques. And I believe we have 6 of those this evening. So it's going to be a full evening, but we certainly encourage you to avail yourself of the chat. There may be an opportunity at the end, depending on how Meagan wants to run this, for questions, but certainly the chat, I believe, will be open, and Meagan's going to be moderating in there. So with that, we're going to start, as I said, with a video remark from Miss Elizabeth Hughes. Give me just a moment to find this. And again, I will mute myself. And if anyone does not hear the audio on this, please wave your hands furiously or let me know. But hopefully this will work. And I will see you on the other side of Elizabeth's remarks. Here we go.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Hughes. I'm the director of the Maryland Historical Trust. I would have loved to have been with you tonight, but I have a senior in high school, and there are lots of events this week at his high school, so I had to decline. Howard gave me the opportunity to share a few thoughts on the state of historic preservation in Maryland, however, which I'm happy to do. First thing I wanted to say, though, is thank you. Thank you for all the great work that you're doing in Prince George's County. You have the toughest job. You're on the front lines. You are the ones who see people in the grocery store who want to tell you, all the problems that they're having, or why that development that got approved is a bad thing, or how you're standing in the way of development. It all depends, right? Thank you for being there and for doing all the great work that you're doing and telling the story of Maryland. preserving places that matter, and being our important partners in Prince George's County. When I look at historic preservation right now in Maryland, coming out of this legislative session in particular, very exciting, lots of funding. I think we're doing very well right now, sort of surprisingly coming out of COVID, right? We saw incredible increases in the state historic tax credit program. We had been stuck at $9 million per year for the competitive commercial program for some years. This year we'll have $22 million. And then in the out years until fiscal year 31, we're expecting to see a $20 million appropriation for the competitive commercial tax credit. The per project cap has been increased as well from $3 million to $5 million. That is going to be very meaningful to larger adaptive reuse projects. For example, the Glendale Hospital project in Prince George's County, is one that comes to mind. Also, the small commercial component of the program will be funded at $2 million per year, starting in fiscal year 24. So that's important for the smaller commercial projects that would never compete in the large commercial program. Another program that saw incredible gains was the African-American Heritage Preservation Grant Program, up from $1 million to $5 million per year, starting in fiscal year 24. That program is incredibly impactful statewide, so we're excited to see the success that has led to this increase in funding for the program, which includes an increase in the per project cap to $500,000 per project, and also eliminates all match requirements for any type of grant applicant. So that's going to be very important to folks. Looking at some statewide initiatives that we've been undertaking, I think what's interesting is there has been funding at the federal level through the National Park Service that we in particular have taken advantage of. I'm not sure the extent to which the county may have applied for grants through the underrepresented communities grants and so forth, but we've found them to be very helpful in supporting initiatives like an African-American civil rights related survey in Baltimore City, development of an LGBTQ historic context, working with Preservation Maryland on that, an Asian American historic resources survey in Montgomery County and Baltimore City. And these projects have been wonderful, but really we need to take them statewide. You can only go so far with these, if you get a $50,000 grant and so forth. And it's a great start, but we really need to be identifying sites to put under the umbrella of the LGBTQ historic context, for example, to list them on the National Register. We need to go beyond Montgomery and Baltimore City and looking at Asian American resources. So I think going ahead, that's something we really need to look at, these initiatives, which are great beginnings, but that's all they are. They need to be statewide efforts that we're undertaking. We've seen a lot of changes in terms of personnel. I don't know if you've had that experience. We have a number of people who have retired after being with us for 30 some years. And we have really a new generation of staff that are coming in, young people that are very energized and have new ideas about how to use social media, how to do our work. And it's been very exciting, very positive. So we're seeing a lot of change, but the lucky thing is we have been able to fill vacancies. So that's been very important. And we're continuing to do that. So please be patient with us as we fill these vacancies. But we are making progress, I'm happy to say. When it comes to technology, I don't know if you've used our online project review and compliance log that's on our website. It's a great way to check on development projects, state or federally funded projects that would be impacting your community, to see where they are in process when it comes to MHT review and what opportunities there are for you to become involved as a consulting party. So that log exists to improve transparency in the process. We're taking it one step further, and under development now is a system where applications and supporting materials will be submitted electronically. And if it's submitted to us electronically, then we can also make it available more readily electronically to the public. So that's something we're working on, along with an online state historic tax credit application. We're following the lead of the National Park Service that's working on a federal tax credit online application. And our goal is to ensure that our state tax credit application matches up with the federal one. So the user has a sort of a seamless application experience. So the feds are supposed to have that done by the end of this year. That's their goal, and that would allow us then to start piggybacking on whatever they've created shortly after that. Coming up very soon, as you may have noticed, driving down any street in Maryland is a series of elections, and we will have a new governor, and with that will come new cabinet members, new secretaries, and of course the Maryland Historical Trust is embedded in the Maryland Department of Planning, so the Secretary of Planning oversees our agency. So I think all of us, but particularly those of us in state government, are going to be looking at what is the platform of the new administration. How do we make sure that historic preservation and interpretation is part of that? How do we support their goals, but also make ourselves visible and our issues visible to them? So that's something we're going to be looking at and working on very soon here. The State Historic Preservation Plan, interestingly, will expire in 2023 as well. So at the end of this year, we're going to begin looking at what have we accomplished, what did we set out to do. The landscape has certainly changed significantly over the past 5 years. And so a lot of our outreach, I anticipate, for the plan is going to be done virtually, now that that is really the way we're doing a lot of our meetings. And we're going to be looking for your feedback and your partnership, your input about what isn't happening that needs to happen, what's working well, what we need more of. So stay tuned for that historic preservation plan update that's going to be really critical to guiding the work of preservation in Maryland going forward after 2023. The last thing that I'll mention is the Maryland 250 Commission. That commemoration of the Revolutionary War, of the founding of the United States, it's not going to be 1976 all over again. We really do need to look at this commemoration as a way to talk about the ongoing evolution of American democracy and what is revolutionary about Maryland, not focus on just one period of time, but more holistically look at where are we today with our democracy and where do we want to be in the future, and how does Maryland fit into that story? So I hope that there will be an opportunity for us to work closely together on that and support any efforts at the local level related to the 250th. And that's just getting off the ground still. So any input you have or feedback on that, recommendations for action, we're very open to hearing from you on that as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to hear from me, and I appreciate the invitation. Have a wonderful Preservation Month reception. And I am off to my son's senior activity at school. So thanks very much and have.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Elizabeth. It was great to hear what is going on at the state level. And we, like her, will certainly be interested in what happens after the upcoming elections. We now move to our co-organizer, Meagan Baco from Anacostia Trails Heritage Area Maryland Milestones. And I assume you will have no problem. Yep, there you go, sharing your screen. And take it away, Meagan.
Okie dokie. Hey, everybody. My name is Meagan Baco. My pronouns are they, them, and I am the Executive Director of Anacostia Trails Heritage Area. I've just surpassed the 1-year anniversary of my tenure here, and it has been a whirlwind and a thrill, and I'm very excited to share just a couple of things that updates on projects that I inherited, and some that are moving right along, and some new initiatives and projects. So I will jump right into it. The AFA was able to work with a National Park Service unit that helps develop conservation, recreation, and trail documents and guidance. And so a couple years ago, I think right before COVID, several meetings and community folks were getting together to talk about Dueling Creek, which is a small area near Colmar Manor, which has wonderful amenities, gazebo, exercise equipment, a community garden, but it's disconnected from the larger park space, or it's a little lesser known entity, and requires you jumping onto Bladensburg to kind of get there. So, and because of the historical importance of Dueling Creek, it was a priority area of Aaron Markovich and before I got here. But I wanted to update on Dueling Creek that the project is moving forward. The county has trail development funds. AFA is also looking to seek additional funds to supplement that so that we can really make the trail an amenity, whether that means making sure lighting, benches, programming, interpretive signs, and things like that, make sure it's really connected and connects with the larger Bladensburg Waterfront Park. There's also a Battle of Bladensburg National Register nomination right now that it's at 99%. I think we're getting some final buy-in and approvals, I believe, from our partners in the district. And we've been in touch with MHT, Kirsten Falk, the other employee over here at AFA, with MHT about that project, which just is a great document to look to for programming for Dueling Creek and the Battle of Bladensburg. The second project that I wanted to highlight was our Civil Rights History Project that's being funded by the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority and the National Park Service African-American Civil Rights Grant Program. Again, this is one I inherited, and it really took a bit to keep it going during COVID. And a lot of our researchers had difficulty accessing the materials they needed. Likewise, I've had some difficulty getting the photographs and the rights, but it's coming together. We'll have 10 signs along with a parallel website, which is going to highlight 10 specific locations related to the civil rights movement, whether it's the protests at Bowie State, protests at Bel Air housing development, and then also some really great achievements, as well as struggles, but achievements at Sis's Tavern related to Black independence and ownership, property ownership and small businesses and building community, and also the recently renamed Jones Hill House at UMD. So we're looking to put these signs in the ground any day now. They are in production and will be installed in the next couple months as we get some of the ownership put together. But please keep an eye out for that. And thank you everybody who's working with us on this, especially related to the research and the sign locations. We think it's going to be a good one. Here's an example of the sign related to Laurel Municipal Pool. So Laurel will get a sign, and then also St. Mark's, which was a church in the Grove of Laurel, which is the historically Black community there, will also be getting a sign, and it's been great to work with the folks at the congregation there. This is a little bit more organizational, but wanted to share some details about some enhancements that I'm working on in AFA. We're going to be launching a new website. We're really focusing on content and maps and the user experience, because we know we're dealing with visitors. You know, you want to eliminate as many barriers as possible to coming and exploring all that we have to offer. So we're going to be putting together a CurateScape mobile website and framework that is used a lot by other humanities and cultural institutions and was actually created at Cleveland State University. We'll be wrapping up a wayfinding project that we were very lucky to work with the county's PAMC program. And we're also renovating the Heritage Center. After 5 years of being open, we've had some great time to observe how people use it and how we can make it better. And we're working on that. So if you come by our shop on Gallatin Street in Hyattsville and the shades are down, that's why. But so we'll have another reason to get together when that's all finished. Also wanted to touch on our grant making. So we have, basically we get a block grant from the state that then we redistribute to small local projects. And this year, just that pot of money is already out, and we will renew at our full amount, which is $25,000 a year, starting on July 1st. So please reach out if you have grant ideas. These are for our smaller grants. And for our larger grants, we're also the gateway to the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority grants. And we really would love to see more grants come in from the heritage area. We are one of the smaller heritage areas, but we still are underrepresented in the grants that come through. So it is a state grant. It does take a while to put together, and you do have to compete at the state level, but that is partially why ATHA's here. We offer the technical assistance and also the connections to make the grant the best it can be. And those are up to $100,000. So please, in your communities and in your projects, think about how we might be able to bring this state funding to projects here in Prince George's County. Lastly, I want to talk about the boundary expansion, which is very exciting. So right now we represent about 100 square miles of Prince George's County. And really it's because the towns along the Route 1 corridor and the Anacostia watershed came together in the late 90s. I'm not telling you all anything you don't already know. Looking at the other panelists, they're like, we were here for this. Anyway, it's important to know that it was a grassroots effort to tap into this state program. And we'd really love to see it expand to the other historic communities in the county. So we've been, it's been a roving circus of Zoom calls, meeting with mayors and council people and other nonprofits to see how we can move this thing forward. We're in the feasibility stage, and you know, AFA needs, as a small nonprofit, needs to be, you know, incredibly careful about expansion versus capacity. So that's been a lot of what we've been focusing on at the organization and the board level. I have a map here and that describes kind of the 4 cluster areas that are likely to be included in any expanded heritage area. But I also want to mention that our friends in Southern Maryland are moving full speed ahead and getting great traction in Congress to become a national heritage area. And that Southern Maryland National Heritage Area will actually include a portion of Southern Prince George's County. So they will go from having no heritage area resources or access to that funding to having multiple resources. So I think it's really going to be a game changer down there in Southern Prince George's County. And that is, I will end on that bit of exciting news and welcome your questions at the end of the program or in the chat or anytime via email, and look forward to continuing to work with you all in this wonderful job. So thank you for having me.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan, for keeping us up to date on everything going on with the Anacostia Trails Heritage Area. Next, we move to Donna Schneider from the Prince George's County Historical Society and Library. Donna, I understand, does not have a presentation, so that has the benefit of we can just look at each other's faces for a few minutes. Donna, take it away.
Okay, good evening, everybody. As Tom says, my name is Donna Schneider, and I'm the president of the Prince George's County Historical Society. And for those of you who might not be aware, we are also the steward of the Frederick S. DeMar Library of County History, which is located in the lower level of the Greenbelt Public Library. The DeMar Library is open on Saturdays from 11 to 3 or by appointment, so please stop by and visit us. We are a research library, so we don't lend any of our items. We have over 6,000 books of county history and state history, as well as some local counties that are nearby. We have hundreds or thousands of photographs, maps, newspapers, even obituaries and biographical files that anybody can come in and peruse. And then we have a historian. Her name is Susan Pearl, which some of you may know. And she answers all of the inquiries that come into our email, info@pghistory.org, about a variety of topics. And we get a lot, and Susan enjoys running off trying to answer all those questions. This spring, we started a new project. It's an ongoing project of scanning and documenting our photograph collection. And that is thanks to a $10,000 SHOP grant that we received from Maryland Humanities. The plan is that we'll eventually partnership with Digital Maryland and be able to share these photographs with the public. And then a couple of months ago, we received another grant. It's a $20,000 Miller grant from the Maryland Center for History and Culture. And these funds are going to be used to help the society figure out how to be able to sustain the DeMar Library into the future. And I'll just make a plug for volunteers. The society is always looking for volunteers, whether it's to help with society activities or the library. So if you have time and you would like to share your talents with us, please give us a call or send us an email. Last year, I shared with everybody that the society had just started our monthly history chats. They turned out to be a hit, so we're continuing them for this year as well. These informal Zoom chats are on the fourth Monday of the month at 7 o'clock. And our next one is Monday, June 27th at 7 p.m., where we will have a chat with Franklin Robinson, talking about preserving your family history. So if you'd like to get on our mailing list about the announcements for these history chats, again, let us know at info@pghistory.org, or check our website. And we also post it on our Facebook page. So you can also do it by becoming a member of the society as well. If you have any suggestions for a chat, we're always open for topics to bring to our audience that they find informative and are something they want to learn more about. So again, please let us know. This year, the society will be celebrating its 70th anniversary, and we are planning to kick it off with a Prince of a County fundraising event later this year, hopefully in September, assuming COVID allows that to happen. And it's going to be at one of our beautiful historic homes here in the county. I'll keep that a secret for right now. Then in April of 2023, we will have our first St. George's Day Awards and Luncheon in 4 years, which we're very excited about giving our St. George's Day Awards again. And if you happen to know anybody who you think may deserve a St. George's Day Award, please, again, let us know. And I want to say thank you again for joining us this evening. And we hope to see you soon at one of our events or virtually for one of our Zoom chats. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Donna. And yes, the history chats really are popular, and there's a good reason for that. I believe that just a couple of days ago, it featured one of our own staff members who we'll be hearing from later, Dr. Jennifer Stabler. They really are interesting, and I encourage you to check out the Society's history chats. So thank you very much, Donna. With that, we are going to move to something, an organization near and dear to my heart, and I know others. I am an alumnus of the Historic Preservation Program at the University of Maryland, and we have a couple of representatives here to speak to us from the HISP program. And I think we're going to start with Dr. Michelle Magalang to present our main speaker, Dr. Stefan Woehlke. So Michelle, take it away while Stefan gets this presentation going.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Tom, for inviting us to join you. Again, my name is Michelle Magalong. I'm at the University of Maryland Historic Preservation Program, and I just wanted to share with you some news. I have been a postdoctoral fellow here in historic preservation since fall 2019, and in August, I will be starting off as assistant professor here in the historic preservation program. And other news, in transition, Jeremy Wells has retired from his position as interim director of our program, and Don Linebaugh, who was our former dean, will be stepping in. And so I wanted to give that kind of sense of transition, what we're going through. And without further ado, I want to invite my colleague, Stefan Woehlke, who is a postdoctoral associate here in the, who has his PhD from Maryland, also in archaeology. And he's going to be giving an overview of the work that we've been doing and some of the awards we've given to our students and how they've been doing work in Prince George's County. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. It is definitely a time of change here at the Historic Preservation Program, and I think we're all looking forward to what next year will bring. And so I will just dive right in. But before I get into the projects, I do just want to mention briefly that there's a lot of support for the work that the Historic Preservation Program has been doing in Prince George's County, from Parks and Planning, of course, and also from across the university. That includes directly from the Historic Preservation Program under former interim director Dennis Pogue and Jeremy Wells, as well as from the School of Architecture overall under former Dean Don Linebaugh and current Dean Don Jordan. And also from the Office of Research and the Department of Anthropology and College of Behavioral and Social Sciences. So there's a lot of support for the work that we've been doing in the county, and we look forward to continuing to contribute what we can, both from the faculty side as well as from the work of our students. And so diving right into that, I want to talk about a few sites where we've been working. One is Concord Manor. First I want to point out this is a project done by a student, Devin Murtha, who was working as an intern with Parks and Planning. And she was researching the history of the enslaved community at Concord Manor and making connections with descendants today to learn their stories and build those connections from the past to the present. She is continuing this work. And so, I was asked not to share too many names or images of the people involved to protect their privacy while everybody decides how exactly they want to move forward. But she's been doing amazing research, and I really look forward to kind of seeing where this goes. And if you are connected to Concord Manor in some way or know people who are, you can reach out to me or really anybody else in the program, and we can help put you in touch with Devin. We've been doing other work at Concord, kind of more traditional documentation work. So a lot of the traditional architectural surveys and documentation has been under the leadership of Dennis Pogue, with students like Sarah Baum, Frankie Evans, Samantha Lee helping with those projects. And I've also been involved with a digital documentation project with students Justin Mohammadi and Olivia Mayoni. And so you can see here an image of the service wing in the top right, as well as some of the point clouds from the digital data that we've collected and are still in process of processing. So you kind of get a sneak peek at some of what will be coming down the line. And just to point out in the bottom left, this is all data collected from the ground with a terrestrial laser scanner and also photogrammetry. And we've started to have high resolution data capture across a large portion of the Concord landscape. And that's something we look forward to continuing more in the future. Another project, which was funded through the Partnership for Action Learning and Sustainability, or the PALS program, with support of Parks and Planning, is the Mapping Racially Restrictive Housing Covenants in Prince George's County project. This is something that student Justin Mohammadi picked up from a class that worked on this back in 2018, and he was able to move the ball significantly down the line, identifying dozens of additional deeds that had restrictive housing language in them, almost all related to race. And you can see some of that language down in the bottom left because it was somewhat standardized. And then you can also see in red in the map on the right where all those properties have been located across the county. So this is something where there is still more work to be done, but Justin did a great job of kind of summarizing our current understanding of racially restrictive housing covenants in the county. And there's been talk and ideas going about of ways we can continue and maybe accelerate the rate at which we can identify these properties. We've also been engaged in a lot of work in North Brentwood. ATHA Rocket Grant has funded some of the equipment for this project, which has then gone on to be used at other sites across the county. So it's paying dividends. And this is a project that I have helped get started in partnership with community members. And so the pilot project was the documentation of Sis's Tavern that you can see there. These are all digital renderings from on-the-ground documentation. This is kind of what the Concord data will be looking like in the near future. And from there, we were able to actually get a grant from the university, from the Catalyst Fund, part of their New Directions grant, to document additional sites across town. And at the bottom of the screen, you see an orthographic image of the Wyndham Road barrier. This was a barrier that was put into Blocker Road that connected Brentwood and North Brentwood back during segregation. And it's currently being reimagined by artists and the Neighborhood Design Center. So this barrier is actually going to be dismantled and used, incorporated into a public art installation and memorial. But we were able to document the barrier and all of its surroundings so that we can preserve that for people in the future. We're also working to document the North Brentwood AME Zion Church and plan to continue its sites across town based on what community members, recommend we focus on and prioritize. We are also actually starting archaeological excavations in North Brentwood next week on Wednesday. I'll be leading an archaeological field school with Justin Mohammadi, again, supporting as an assistant in the field, where we'll be excavating the former home and office of Dr. Spiller, the town doctor in North Brentwood. And so this is an effort to recover some of that data before the site is turned into a park to memorialize the entrepreneurs past, present, and future in North Brentwood. And so we want to collect as much information as we can about Dr. Spiller's life before we memorialize him in that space as an entrepreneur. But we hope to, again, continue to expand these excavations and also tie them into the digital record that we are capturing of the built environment. So really connecting the archaeological resources to the standing historical resources, and then tell those stories using digital tools where people will be able to explore and learn about the town through the words of the residents, as opposed to people like me who are will always be a student of North Brentwood and not really the teacher per se. And so with all of that work, we did have some student awards. So Devin Murtha was awarded the St. Clair Wright Award for all of her hard work at Concord and the contributions she has made to telling the stories of the enslaved community there and their descendants. And Justin Mohammadi also earned the Prince George's Heritage Fellowship Award for his work on the Racially Restrictive Housing Covenants Project, which hopefully we can get him to do more work on between all the other projects he's currently working on in the county. So that's it for for us at University of Maryland's Historic Preservation Program, but we really look forward to continuing partnering with all of you and continuing the work that we can do across the county. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much to Stefan, and thank you to Michelle for the introduction. And I can just say personally that working with the Historic Preservation Program on some of the projects that are run through the PALS program, it's one of the other duties as assigned that I really actually enjoy, because they're always interesting projects and they're valuable. The work that Stefan and Justin have done on restrictive covenants has been really not only important, but innovative. I know Stefan has worked on some ways of making land records from the early 20th century more accessible and more searchable. And for those of us that do that sort of research, it's a very exciting prospect for us. And so, you know, fortunately and unfortunately, there is a lot more work in that area to be done. And so as Stefan said, it'll be great to see that play out. But really the PALS program and the collaboration that the Planning Department and the Parks and Recreation Department has had with the University of Maryland is really great. It's fruitful, and I look forward personally, and I think I speak for others, including Jennifer Stabler, who's worked on some of these projects. We look forward to working on future projects. So thank you very much, Stefan and Michelle. We're now going to turn to our colleagues in the Department of Parks and Recreation. We have with us this evening Ed Day, who is the lead historic preservation officer for the Department of Parks and Recreation. And Ed, hopefully you have the ability to share your presentation. Let me know if you have any trouble, but I'm getting a shake of the head.
We seem to be having an issue, Tom. So
okay,
if you could
let me dial it up.
Great.
Sure, let me dial it up, and I will let you.
It may have to do with our SharePoint, and then there's a little bit of a lag, so it wasn't downloading, but I really appreciate being able to talk. Stefan, one of the other things we partner with you on is the scanning of those buildings. And if you've never seen some of those scans, they're just absolutely incredible. When you're standing physically in front of a building, you're looking at it, you're not really taking it all in. And when a scan shows you, it's just absolutely remarkable. So thanks for having me back. I hope that this is the last one we do virtually. I mean, in a way it's easy because there's no cleanup, and you can pour your own wine as much as you want to. But in the end, we kind of miss rubbing elbows with each other's shoulders and that human aspect. So I hope that this is the last one. And so I'm looking forward to next year. Again, I'm Ed Day. I work in the Department of Parks and Recreation. I get to deal with an incredible portfolio of properties, just an absolutely incredible portfolio. We're blessed to be working on these structures. Gina Vaughn and Brian Carroll and myself and some other folks that make up our little merry band I'm going to mention later. So with that, Tom, could you advance the next screen? I wanted to talk about how we got where we are and do the work that we do. And I wanted to talk about how absolutely unbelievably blessed that the county is with the historic resources it has. And I just want to go over this really quick to tell you how we got there and how we're able to do this work. So we have 46 properties, 176 structures, 14 on the National Register of Historic Places, 2 National Historic Landmarks. You see the list on the left. It goes on and on and on, and they're all over the county, all over the map, north to south. Next screen, if you would, Tom. So Prince George's is pretty unique by comparison. We have 46 properties I've mentioned, probably a couple more now. National Park Service, they're the king of it, the king and queen, the all-time champ, 85,000 buildings. We can't compete with that. But if you compare us to National Trust for Historic Preservation, they own 26. City of Baltimore owns 14, so we're not doing really bad. I think that's pretty impressive. But that means that we really have to take our stewardship of these properties seriously. So the next page will show you, this is our science page. You can tell that we used chemistry here to sort of give it that importance. We got to a point where we needed to know what we were liable for and how we were going to be able to take care of them. So in 2017, we started this survey called the assessment internally. And we talked about, how do we handle these properties? We got Davis Buckley Architects to do, multi-point checks on these things, what we need to do, architectural, civil, structural, electromechanical, and cost estimating. They did 66 structures and 27 sites. And we were able to package it together and make an ask. And so if you go to the next screen, based on that assessment, the Department of Parks and Recreation realized it needed to fund it. So we made a commitment, and I want to, right now, she's on here. She made a really nice comment. My division chief, Chris Fanning, was tireless in helping get this across the line and give us a CIP, capital improvement funding, $5 million over 5 years. So we're up to $20 million. And we're making it work, and we're out there every day. COVID did not stop us. We're out there in the trenches in the scaffolding. You can see Gina Vaughn and Brian Carroll there in that photo, as long as our pictures aren't blocking them out, up on the scaffolds at Marietta. We did some things internally also to tune it up. We looked at hiring qualified on-call contractors. We formed the Historic Preservation Coordinating Group to coordinate efforts within the department across the different divisions and communicate, so we eliminate redundancy, and so hopefully, we're a little bit more effective. We revamped our Historic Preservation Maintenance Unit. It's more of a Historic Preservation Unit now with a specific focus. I mentioned Gina and Brian, and we also have a carpenter. His name is Kevin Williams. On the next screen internally, it kind of shows you a breakdown of how we manage it. Some of you have seen it, some of you haven't. We have divisions represented all the way across the board. Arts and Cultural Heritage, Jonathan Caudle is in there representing Park Planning Development, Pia Helva, Sylvan Miles, Ashley Heyman, Cameron Duncan, Maintenance Development, Greg Stansbury. So just across the board, we have representation. And then that group reports each month to Tom and Howard's group, the Historic Preservation section, and we share information, and they're able to report to our commissioners about what we're doing. And I think it's been a really good, relationship. If you turn the page now, you're going to see what's new, our current projects in 2022. You're going to see a lot of structures, but there's some there's some diversity in our portfolio as well. We're only going to talk about 16, maybe to 20 tonight. But as you can see, some what I call sort of the Zen-like approach to fixing these structures. The images on the left is of a barn at Compton Bassett. Actually, there's two different barns at Compton Bassett. You can see a before and after picture on the one at the top, which is an ancient barn. And then one we just got into, it was a early 20th century poured concrete barn. And we're down there doing it the old-fashioned way with some Amish tradespeople that are just really doing a great job on that. We're working on Cherry Hill Cemetery, which is up near East Pines between 450 and the Parkway. It's an African-American cemetery that's been overlooked in the back of a community. We just did some geophysical work I want to give a shout out to Dr. Kristen Monteperdo, if she's on here. She's been back there, that's her property, and we found a significant amount of burials back there. And so we've got some hardscaping, we're going to do some security and get the community involved, and it's coming together pretty nice, kind of holistically. Concord Manor is coming online. We're doing some work down there on the stable and corn crib, and the barn we're getting ready, the old tobacco barn we're getting ready to take down because it collapsed unfortunately in a windstorm years ago. But the main house is going to be being restored by Park Planning and Development. Compton Bassett, just mentioned that. If you roll the screen there, Tom, for me. At Darnell's Chance, we're doing some parking lot lighting down there. Dorsey Chapel, there's a photo there. This new roof was installed. Interior millwork on the windows, benches, and floors. And here's the thing about some of the things we do. There's a congregation that uses that. So the community is actually getting some use. This isn't done in a vacuum. And that's what we want to see with our historic properties. We want to see them used and enjoyed. Marietta Mansion, geez, the work that's going on over there is just amazing. Montpelier, Newton White, we're doing some roofing. And if you advance the screen there again for me, Tom, thank you. You're doing a great job. You're the Vanna White of Vanna Whites. Thank you. You'll see the Surratt House, which looks like the Surratt House. If you look closely, we've just reclad it. It looks like $1 million. It didn't cost $1 million, but it looks like $1 million. And I think Veronica may be on this as well. I mean, I think she's pretty happy with that. And so you can see the results. Again, Newton White, we're doing some work. We just finished repointing Northampton's slave quarters. You're going to see a post on the PG History social media website. We were down there the other day, sort of doing some taping. Check that out if you haven't seen it on Facebook. So it just goes on and on. Some folks asked about the Peace Cross, the restoration's in progress. It's going to be finished on November 11 at 11. So there you go. Snow Hill Manor is doing really well. And we just mentioned Surratt House. Other large projects that are coming up, Tom, if you advance that, we do work in conjunction with the Park Planning Development section, and Pia Helv and Sylvan Miles actually are working on some of these major projects. There's a couple photos here: Delphi Mill, Concord, Mount Calvert, Riversdale. I heard of that place, and Snow Hill. And if you look on the right, you can see some investigation going on down at Mount Calvert. And I'm sure, absolutely, that Kristen's going to be happy about that. If you advance the screen, I was talking about diversity of resources. This is something else we're involved in, not just the built environment, built structures. This is some old airplane technology over at College Park Airport. It's a compass rose. And I kind of wondered what it was. It kind of looks like a tetherball court, but it's not. I thought maybe it was some monument to the, anniversary of airmail or something, but it's not. It's actually where planes would get up to it and they would calibrate their instruments to fly north or to get their direction. So we're going to go out there. It's actually, and I hate to say this, a little bit worse condition than those photos. Those are older photos, but we're going to restore it. And if you see to the left, there are plaques there commemorating certain milestones in that little device's history. But it's amazing to think, we can fly transatlantic, transpacific, all over the world. And it's all electronic now, but back then it was dead reckoning. So I just want to thank you for allowing me, and I kept that within the 10 minutes, I'm fairly sure, to speak. We got a lot going on. And if you have any questions, I am always at your beck and call at edward.day@pgparks.com. So thank you so much. And I'll take questions, later on, like Meagan was saying. And so thank you. Appreciate your support.
Great. Thank you so much, Ed. And you were right, 10 minutes on the dot. That is terrific. But you packed a lot in, and I'll just echo a couple of things. As Ed said, his group meets with us in the Historic Preservation section once a month, and we always benefit from that. I know the Historic Preservation Commission benefits from the information sharing. And it's great to see the work that goes on. I know we had an event not too long ago at Newton White Mansion, and while I was out there looking at the roof, all I could think of was, oh, that's right, they're working on the roof. So we know that they're always doing work on these magnificent buildings, and we appreciate it. The residents of the county appreciate it. Everyone that experiences those properties appreciates it. So thank you very much, Ed. And that brings us to our little corner of the world. Give me just a moment to get our slide presentation up, because now we turn to the staff of the Historic Preservation Commission, the Planning Department's Historic Preservation section. I will start things off here in just a moment as soon as I get this queued up. And share and share and share. And here we go. So again, I am Tom Gross. I serve as the Historic Preservation Commission staff liaison in the Historic Preservation section. I'm going to go through just in literally a couple of minutes some of the top line programmatic things that the Commission has accomplished over the past year. And then I will turn it over to what's bound to be a more interesting discussion by Dr. Jennifer Stabler, talking about some of the archaeological highlights of the HPC and its staff's work over the past year. So just similar to something that Ed did, just to give you kind of a top line view of our program in the county, the Historic Preservation Commission has jurisdiction over the 458 designated county designated historic sites that, if you joined us last year, has crept up a little bit, which is what we like to see. There are 84 what are called unclassified historic resources, which are pending evaluation to determine whether they meet historic site criteria. That number has decrease since last year, which is what we like to see. We have 4 locally designated historic districts, the largest being Old Town College Park and Broad Creek. 100 National Register listed properties, 18 National Register historic districts, and 6 National Historic Landmarks. Points to someone in the chat who thinks they can name all 6 or even a majority of those. So just a few notes. So one of the most exciting things that the Historic Preservation Commission does and that we get to work on are making new historic sites, bringing new properties into the fold. And in the past year, 2 such properties were designated as historic sites, both actually just last month in April. The first was the Magruder-McGregor Family Cemetery on Westphalia Road in Upper Marlboro. The property that contains the cemetery is going through the development entitlement process. And as part of that, a historic resource on the property, which encompassed both this family cemetery and the site of a former house known as Dunblane, were evaluated for historic site designation. The house was destroyed by a gas explosion in the late 1960s, so there is really no, at least above ground remnant of that. Nevertheless, on the basis of the significance and remaining features of the cemetery, the Historic Preservation Commission designated the Magruder-McGregor Family Cemetery as a historic site, and the cemetery will be preserved amidst the proposed development on that property. The other property that was designated as a historic site was the Smith Israelson House in Mount Rainier. This is a circa 1917 American foursquare. And this was actually designated not by the action of the Historic Preservation Commission, but by the County Council, because this property was not in our inventory of historic resources, but the property owners were interested in participating in our county's historic property grant program. And in order to do that, they had to have their property evaluated for historic site designation. So you see just a few photos here, this great photo showing just after the house was constructed in the early 1920s. And another one of the interesting features of the property is this little cistern, which is evidence of how residents in Mount Rainier got their water before there was a municipal water system. The house, by the way, was named for the not first occupants, but the first occupants of substantial duration, Edward and Maggie Smith, and also Mrs. Joe Israelson, who is a noted Maryland sculptor who owned the house from 1976 to 1999. And you'll be hearing more about this property a little bit later in another section of the presentation. So, and again, I'm just giving you a brief thumbnail of these 2 properties, but if you have any interest in either of these new historic sites, we have full documentation that we'd be happy to share. I mentioned the Historic Property Grant Program a moment ago. Once again, we had a successful solicitation for applications to the grant program for fiscal year 2022, and awards were made by the planning department the planning board to 10 properties. You can see a map showing their geographical location. And we were excited to be able to give away $400,000 total this year. That's up from $350,000 in the previous cycle. And we hope that will continue for the next year. And you can see examples of just a few of the properties that received grants at the bottom there. The Rizzo House in Hyattsville, Hitching Post Hill also in Hyattsville, one of our newest historic sites, the Thomas Seabrook House in Lanham, and St. Joseph's Chapel in Beltsville. And not only are we excited to announce new awards, we're excited to announce when money actually goes out the door in the form of reimbursements. In the past year, just under $210,000 were reimbursed. So it's great to see the awards. It's great to see the money actually being used. We have, as you may know, also a non-capital grant program that was stood up just a few years ago. In the past year, 2 projects were awarded non-capital grants. Their first is the Mount Nebo and Queen Anne Oral History Project, sponsored by a local organization. Mount Nebo is a historically African-American community that centered around not only the church there, but a now demolished church building, school building nearby. So this will be an interesting project, trying to record the oral histories of some of the older residents of that area, or former residents of that area. The other non-capital grant in the past year was awarded for the Mount Hope Slave Quarter Ruin Archaeology. This structure is an unclassified historic resource in our inventory. It sits in the middle of someone's backyard in Cheverly, and tradition has it that this structure was once part of an enslaved dwelling in the 19th century. The documentary evidence is really insufficient to corroborate that, and so the property owners applied for and received a non-capital grant to have archaeology conducted in the site around the structure to determine whether it was indeed constructed in the 19th century, whether there's evidence of 19th century occupation by formerly enslaved workers of the Mount Hope plantation. So the results of that are pending, but it's a great project and it will certainly help in the eventual evaluation of this historic resource. Our most widely used incentive is the Historic Preservation Tax Credit, and in the past year, 10 properties were awarded preservation tax credits totaling just under $165,000. And the tax credit is great because it can be used to defray the expenses of a wide range of projects. So just going clockwise from the upper left here, you see a newly constructed house in College Park, which received a 10% tax credit. In-kind replacement of windows in a colonial revival house in Bowie, shake roof replacement on a house in Upper Marlboro, porch repair in Hyattsville, electrical repairs in Mount Rainier. And I just like this picture because it shows that preservation can be exciting or it can be kind of banal, but nonetheless important. The replacement of a waste pipe in the basement of a house in College Park. So we're very happy to get preservation tax credits and to help property owners mitigate the costs that inevitably come with owning an older home. So with that, I believe that's all I have. I will turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Jennifer Stabler. I will continue running the slides, but Jennifer?
Okay, thanks,
the floor is
Tom.
yours.
Yeah, thanks, Tom, and good evening, everyone. And I would also like to give a plug for the history chats that the Historical Society does. And I want to point out, I was just the moderator of the last history chat. The real star of the show was Dr. Kristen Monaperto, who's the chief archaeologist in our Parks Department. And she talked about 4 of our county historic sites that are on parkland. So, and some of the exciting work that they're doing with the archaeological investigations there. So I would encourage you to view that if you have a chance and you're interested in what's going on in our Parks Department. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So I am the county planning board's archaeologist. So I review a lot of the development applications that come into the planning department, and I make recommendations to the planning board on whether archaeological surveys should be conducted on those properties. And development is booming in the county, and so a lot of our archaeological resources are being affected by all this development. So I'm just going to talk about 4 projects, since we have limited time, that have happened over the past year or so, where we have some significant findings. The first is the Mill Branch Crossing project, which is in Bowie. And if you know Bowie, this is across from the Walmart. And this was an 18th century site was identified in the initial survey that was done on the property. And after doing a lot of background research on the property, we identified the Boyd and Go families who occupied this property. So Tom, can you go to the next slide, please? This family owned a large chunk of an original land grant that was called Ample Grange. And you can see up in sort of the top left-hand corner, William Go lived on this 100-acre property. And he married one of the Boyds, one of the Boyds. And can you go to the next slide, please? So during the phase 1 and phase 2 investigations, this 18th century site was identified. And when they did those investigations, they gathered sort of a representative sample of artifacts in this plowed field. This field had been plowed for hundreds of years, but there were a number of features that were preserved below the ground surface. And so what we did for what we call our phase 3 investigations, this is the final round of investigations to try to save from the site what we can. They did they took a backhoe and they stripped the plow zone off of the top of the fields, and that revealed all of these, what you see are features, all these little flags, all of those are features that were found. And they're the remnants of buildings and trash pits and privies and things like that. Okay, next slide, please. And this looks like a lot of strange lines on a map, but what you see at the top was identified as the dwelling house of William Goh and his family. And there's supporting outbuildings. So as we go down here, we think that possibly the feature that's below the top 2 rectangles there could have been one of the slave quarters. We know that the Gohs did hold several enslaved people on the property. And as you go further to the south here, the very large building at the very bottom, we think is a corn crib. And I found mention of the corn crib in some of the historical documents, and it said it was a fairly large building. And this building sort of fit into that description. One of the other buildings there was likely a smokehouse. And we know from a lot of the animal bone that was collected, seeds and things like that, we could pretty much tell what the people were eating and growing on the property. So we do a lot of different studies to identify what's happening on a particular property. And there have been several public presentations that have been given on this site. And anyway, it yielded some very important information on an 18th century house lot in Prince George's County. Okay, let's go to the next slide. These are some of the artifacts. These are all 18th century artifacts, wine bottles, ceramics, nicely painted wares. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so our next site is the Fairview Historic Site in Bowie. This property is going through the development process. The current owner is proposing to put a school on the property. And so this is one of our county historic sites. So our Historic Preservation Commission asked the property owner to do some archaeological investigations before deciding where they're going to put their buildings and before they start actual construction. So next slide, please. So these are the results of the archaeological investigation. What the archaeologists do in the initial investigations is they do what's called a shovel test pit survey. So they dig these holes about every like 5 feet or so. And what you see in the red there, those are the areas where they were finding artifacts. So that gives us clues as to where buildings might have been located. So we've been working with the applicant to try to avoid areas where we believe there are intact features or archaeological remains, but so that they can still move forward with their development without impacting archaeological resources. And they have been very cooperative with us, and they're very excited about what's being found in the archaeology. And so they'll be a very good partner for taking care of this historic site as well as its archaeological resources. Next slide, please. This is another technique that we use. This is imagery called LIDAR, and it actually it gives you a really good look at features on the landscape. And nature doesn't do straight lines. So usually when you see a lot of straight lines, that means people are involved. So towards the bottom of that photograph, you can see the darker orange That actually shows you some terracing that was in front of the house. And these terrace gardens were something that was very common for elite families would have on their properties, that, you know, they were for their guests to enjoy and things like that. So so originally the landowner wanted to put some I guess features in this part of the property, and we kind of discouraged them from doing that because this is actually part of the 19th century landscape of this important historic site. And in the back, you can kind of see a sunken area there in the lighter yellow. And we believe that that might have been a spring or a well or something that was the source of the drinking water for the family and for the enslaved people who lived on the property. And to the right, you can see a little small square. That's the family cemetery. So the LiDAR is great. It gives you a really good look at, you can really see man-made features on the ground surface with this technique. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the Butler House. This is yet another one of our historic properties that is involved in a recent development called Harbor View. It's in the Oxon Hill area, or it's probably Forest Heights, I guess is more accurate. So there have been ongoing, our Historic Preservation Commission has reviewed these applications that come into the planning department, and they make recommendations to our planning board on what should happen with the historic site, with archaeological investigations. And so we are in the process of going through that now, coming up with our recommendations for this particular property. This is a very old photograph. Unfortunately, the poor building has collapsed and it really is unsalvageable. So we're trying to do as much archaeology on the property as we can to gather any significant information on this house was owned by the Butler family. They were a free African-American family who resided on this property. I think they originally built the house around 1860. And they ran a post office out of the house. The road that ran next to the house was a very old road. People called it the old postal road, and it was the main road that went from Washington D.C. down to the southern part of Maryland, and that used to be the old postal road as well. And so we are working with the developer to try to preserve a portion of that road in the development and use it as a trail. As an amenity for the people who will be living on this property. Next slide, please. This is just I think this is the 1894 Hopkins map. Of course, it says right on the slide. And you can see that where the Butlers were living, and there's the old postal road. And there were two other African-American families who were also free prior to the Civil War who lived to the north of the Butlers. Henry Hatton and the Proctor family, and there were remains found of their houses as well, but they were so disturbed that there really was not a lot of information we could get out of those. But we did a lot of historical research on these families, and again, we are working with the developer to develop some interpretive signage so that the people who will eventually live on this property will learn a little bit, hopefully, about the very significant history of this property and its African-American occupants. Next slide, please. This is just another map showing you the old road and the Butler and the Hatton residences. Next slide. And this is one feature. This is a brick line well. This was probably the original well that was used by the family. It's one of the few features that remains intact. And we are going to be doing some further studies on the well. Wells are sometimes good, places where you can find lots of artifacts at the bottom. So we're hoping that we can reach the bottom and maybe find some early artifacts there that will give us some more information on the activities of the Butler family on the property. Okay, next slide, please. And these are just some of the artifacts. Again, most of these are 20th century and some 19th century artifacts that were found. But these are the types of things that we find in the investigations, and they give us lots of clues about everyday life, the everyday life of the people who lived on this property. Next slide, please. And last but not least, this is the Kildare Historic Site. This is not too far from the Butler House. It's also in Oxon Hill. This is one of our historic sites that also will eventually be going through development. The house is in very poor condition, and there are archaeological investigations going on out there as we speak. These were some of the features that were found in some of the earlier investigations. The one in the bottom left, this was a very large pit where they found, it was just chock full of artifacts, mainly 18th century artifacts. And we think that this was a pit where there was an earlier house or some type of building on the site that was dismantled, and basically everything was thrown into this pit. So we've got a really good cross-section of 18th century materials from that pit. The foundation that you see at the top, we think that that is the foundation of the earlier house that was on the property, and it actually goes underneath the current house that's on the property. So we're hoping that once the house comes down, we will do additional investigations below where the house was and try to figure out how this earlier house relates to the later house. So those investigations are ongoing, and we hope to, maybe next year we'll give you the results of what is happening out at Kildare. And that's it for me.
Okay, thank you so much, Jennifer. That was great. And I know that, sometimes it's a little hard for us, or maybe it's not the most exciting or gratifying part of our job to review development applications, but sometimes the silver lining is you do learn something about a property that you didn't know before because someone else has been paid to dig it up and look. So again, these are just kind of the numbers to leave you with. And I'm now going to turn it over to our esteemed supervisor, Howard Berger, who is going to conclude the evening with something that is very exciting, and it is our 2022 historic plaque presentation. So Howard.
Thank you, Tom, and good evening, everybody. The Historic Preservation Commission has a long tradition of conferring or awarding bronze historic site plaques to historic sites throughout the county. And it's not quite as grand as it sounds because the plaques are paid for by the property owners. The cost of the plaques are subsidized by the planning department, but there's actually a purchase involved. So it's not as competitive or as lofty as you might think, but at any rate, after more than 30 years or so, there are hundreds of properties throughout the county that have bronze historic site plaques on them because their owners felt that as part of their stewardship, they wanted to acknowledge the significance of their particular property by demonstrating, having a plaque placed on it so that people who were walking or driving by would know that this is a county historic site. So over the years, we've done hundreds of these things, and it's completely random because we send a letter out to both new and old property owners every year to ask them whether they want to participate in this program. And this year we have a crop of 6 properties who have agreed to purchase plaques and to display them on their properties. And I want to just show you some slides so you get the sense of what these properties are, and then to try to describe them to you to get some sense of their significance. I hope that my voice holds out into the end because I've got 2 full pages here to read, but I'll try to make it as interesting and as animated as possible. The important thing to realize is that there are properties of all types. There are residences, there are cemeteries, there are churches. Every conceivable form of a historic site is eligible to receive such a plaque. So without further ado, can I have the first slide, Tom? As you can see here, this property is the Lake House, also known as the Presbyterian Parsonage, located at 8524 Potomac Avenue in Berwyn Heights. The property was built in 1894 by and for the family of Wilmot Lake using a pattern book design. The Lake House is a 2.5-story cross-gabled frame house with very fine Queen Anne style carpentry details. The house is distinguished by a 3-story octagonal tower, novelty shingles, and a lacework veranda with a spindled frieze, which you can see in the photograph. From 1919 to the late 1950s, this house served as the parsonage for the Berwyn Presbyterian Church. It is now the only Queen Anne style dwelling surviving from the 1890s Central Heights subdivision in Berwyn Heights. The property has been owned by Jan and Leela Stiff since 2020, and they are currently engaged in a comprehensive rehabilitation project. And I think the results, when they're completed in the relatively near term, are going to be terrific. But in the interim, they've decided to recognize the significance of the property by purchasing a plaque. So we're very happy to see that. Next slide. The Smith Israelson House at 3215 Perry Street in Mount Rainier. You've heard something about that already earlier this evening. This is a circa 1917 2.5-story, 3-bay wide American four-square with a raised wrap-around porch supported by Tuscan columns. The house is a representative example of the types of houses built in the emerging suburbs of Prince George's County in the early years of the 20th century. Edward Smith was from Boonesboro, Maryland, and worked as a huckster for much of his early life. His wife, Maggie Smith, was from Virginia. In the mid-1910s, Edward Smith began working for the Bureau of Printing and Engraving in Washington, D.C., and when they resided in this house. The house has had a number of owners across the 20th century and has been owned since 2020 by its current owner, Sachin Kandari. And as Tom mentioned earlier, the house is partially named for Joe Israelson, who is a prominent Maryland sculptor who no longer lives in Mount Rainier, but she owned the house from 1976 to 1999. And the current owner wanted to make sure that her tenure there was commemorated in the name of the historic site. Next, please. Whoop. Okay, I think we got out of order. But anyway, Trinity Episcopal Church. Something's going
No,
on.
I'm sorry. Here you are. It
There
just
we
skipped. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. The next property to receive a plaque is the Osborne Talbert Cemetery at 10907 Westphalia Road in Greater Upper Marlboro. And as you can see from the photograph, there's at least one prominent feature within the cemetery. The Osborne Talbert Family Cemetery is located on an 89.42 acre tract located at the southwest corner of the intersection of Westphalia Road and Ritchie Marlboro Road in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. This is a family cemetery established in the early 19th century and currently located between two farm fields on the Bean Farm east of the farmhouse near Ritchie Marlboro Road. The cemetery is bordered by a wrought iron fence, and the burial ground is surrounded by cedars and other large trees. The tract of land on which the burial ground is located was originally patented as Alexandria in 1670 by Alexander Magruder. Jesse Talbert acquired more than 300 acres of the Alexandria patent on the west side of Ritchie Marlboro Road in 1818. The earliest marked burial in the cemetery is that of Mildred Talbert, who died in 1834. The latest marked burial is that of J. Osborne Talbert, who died in 1894. In 1925, 319 acres of the former Talbert farm were sold to Arsenius W. Bean Sr. The property has descended in the Bean family since then and is still owned by descendants. Next slide. Great. Trinity Episcopal Church, 14509 Church Street in Upper Marlboro. Built in 1846 and remodeled in 1896, Trinity Church is constructed of brick with a steeply pitched gable roof, Gothic arch stained glass windows, and a later entry tower. The church was designed by Baltimore architect Robert Carey Long Jr. and built on the site of the Episcopal Church organized in 1810 by Bishop Thomas John Clagett. The four-story crenellated entry tower was constructed in 1896. Trinity Church has long associations with the prominent families of Upper Marlboro, many of whom are buried in the cemetery that surrounds the church. Next slide. Thank you. This property is known as the Shoals Mark 1964 model, or the Lang House, which is located at 13506 Reed Circle in Fort Washington. The Shoals Mark 64 Lang House is a one-story brick dwelling built in 1964 with a contemporary aesthetic conveyed through the shallow pitch of the roof, overhanging eaves with exposed beams, and full-height windows that dominate the front and rear gables. The Shoals Mark 1964 is significant as a virtually unaltered example of mid-century modern luxury housing designed by the prefabricated home manufacturer Don Scholes and Associates as part of their annual Mark series. It is further significant for its association with the Lang family, who owned and occupied the house for more than 50 years until its sale to the current owners, Jeffrey Dorman and Michelle Watkins, in 2018. Thank you. And last but not least, our sixth property for the evening is the Asbury Methodist Episcopal Church and Cemetery located at 4004 Accokeek Road in Brandywine. The Asbury Methodist Episcopal Church is a gable-roofed frame dwelling, constructed in 1906 and substantially rebuilt in 1958, with a one-story concrete block and brick addition constructed in 1974. The gable-roofed wing extending from the north elevation of the addition previously stood as a separate building. The spired bell tower, clad in patterned wood shingles and embellished by a bracketed cornice, is the only element that dates to the church's original construction of 1906. A cornerstone near the front of the sanctuary records the construction dates as 1876, 1906, and 1958. The church cemetery is located west of the church building and occupies a loosely defined area of open field and woodland. There are approximately 80 marked graves and an unknown number of unmarked graves. The markers are arranged in rows and are generally grouped by family, with the oldest graves lying closest to the church. The form, size, and materials of the markers vary, including concrete and marble tablets, granite headstones and footstones, concrete crosses, and concrete columns. The church is significant as a representative rural example of the African-American religious institutions established after the end of the Civil War. So with that, you are now aware of the 6 properties, which in the near term will have bronze plaques delivered to them, and hopefully the next time you drive by, you'll see it. Typically, the plaques are placed to the right of the front door, if that's possible. Occasionally, you'll see a plaque erected on a signpost or a signboard specifically for that purpose, but also ideally near the entrance to the building. So with that, I will turn the program back over to Tom for some closing remarks.
Okay, thank you so much, Howard. And that was very exciting to hear about those new plaque recipients, many of which are relatively recently designated properties, and a couple that are near and dear to my heart because I had the opportunity to work on the evaluations, including the Lang House and the Asbury Church here. So thank you. that brings us, everyone, to the end of our program this evening. I want to thank once again our speakers, Meagan Baco, who also co-organized the event with us and was responsible for the registration and for the technical, actually the Zoom account that we're using. Meagan, thank you very much for that. Donna Schneider of the Prince George's County Historical Society, Stefan Woehlke and Michelle Magalang of the University of Maryland, Ed Day with the Parks Department, my colleague Jennifer Stabler, and Howard Berger from the Department of Planning, from the Planning Department's Historic Preservation section. I believe, we are now at around 8:35, so for a preservation group, I think only running half an hour over is pretty good. So you all are invited to, I suppose, stick around until someone shuts us down. I think that'll be Meagan's responsibility. So whenever they want to shut us down, that's fine. But this has been a lot of fun. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. Folks can hang out in the chat, I suppose. But unless anyone else who has the ability to speak has any words of closing or benediction, we will call it a night.